The next question, the next couple of questions are about policing. What have you been doing to assure Black and Brown constituents that they are not being unfairly policed and that individual officers are being held accountable?
Another very important and good question. Well, as people might know, during this last 4 years, we recognized that we needed to have a citizen oversight over police complaints. There was a sense that maybe that was not functioning well. And so the old process was discarded and dissolved. The mayor put together a task force that studied other communities for best practices in terms of what should be a citizen police review committee. That task force brought back their recommendations on what to form, how to form a committee, what their powers should be, so that they should be able to review all police complaints, EPD investigations of police complaints, report to the city council, write their own report, and have monthly meetings in which they are empowered themselves to investigate these issues and report on them. And so the council adopted the task force's recommendations, and then which was to have a 9-member citizen police review commission. And the mayor made recommendations. He asked for people to volunteer. My understanding, he had 90 applications for 9 spaces. He sent his appointment recommendations to the city council, and we reviewed them. There's a real focus on making sure there's a strong representation of our Black and Brown community members, people who've lived here a long time, people who haven't lived here as long, different age groups, and a good cross-section of people who would be knowledgeable and who you'd want to hear from. And that commission has been meeting and functioning and reviewing complaints and reporting to a Human Services Committee, which is a subcommittee of the City Council. So I think in that sense, we have made the process more transparent and more accessible for any citizen. I think that's really important. The other things that we've done, as many people may know, is that in the wake of George Floyd's murder, many police departments, including our own, turned the lens on themselves and said, what can we do? And the mayor adopted the Obama Foundation's commitment to action plan. And over the course of the summer, over 90 days over the course of the summer, with the city staff and the police department, there was a review of every aspect of our city's use of force plan and the police budget, and the mayor engaged in weekly meetings, question and answers with the police chief and police staff on all aspects of our policing. So it was a really interesting look into the budget, how we hire, who we hire, what's going on with our arrest records. In addition, we asked for Northwestern's Institute of Policy Research to analyze our use of force policy. And they came back with recommendations at the end of the summer that have now are being implemented in terms of oversight, use of force, de-escalation training. You know, all of these things are critical. I mean, no police force is ever, can ever rest on its laurels, or it has to be re-examining itself continually. It's an evergreen process. It never stops. And so I think these are some things that we're doing to improve citizens' interaction with our police department. But at the same time, I want to make it possible for anyone who has an interaction with our police department that they are unhappy with, to let them know that there is a way for them to complain, to file a complaint, and there is a process where they will be heard and it will be shared with the city council. So improving that and making sure that's transparent and that people can access that are really critical, because we can't have an effective police force unless we have the trust of the community in them.
How do you go about listening to and weighing conflicting calls from constituents, some who might want less of a conventional police presence and some who might want more?
Well, and I've had that happen. Certainly over the last 6 months, I've had many discussions with people on both sides of that issue. I think what I've done is listen to what people are concerned about. And to the extent that I can give them more information or answer questions or figure out what to the degree of their concern and how I can um, sort of just provide more information. Many people they want more information. I mean, citizens of Evanston, there is no amount of information that is ever too much for an Evanston resident, I've found. And uh, so, I've had discussions with people and had to balance and measure what their concerns are. I've had residents who tell me that they're frightened of the police, and I've tried to understand that better and figure out ways in which I can help them understand or work with their fears and perhaps find out why they are. I've also had people say, I don't want the police defunded at all. They make me feel safe. So I think it's a community discussion that we have to have. And that's why I think over the summer, breaking down the police department and how it's funded and what it does is really important and I urge people to go on the city's website. There is a FAQ, frequently asked questions, section of our city's, the police department site, which talks about, that we chokeholds are not allowed. That's a question I get a lot. What's prohibited? What's the process for police discipline? Unlike cities like Minneapolis or New York or Chicago, we don't have a police union that has that power that we hear about in those other communities, where even a disciplined officer somehow is back on the force. We don't have that. I mean, our police union does not behave that way. And I think it's a reflection of the fact that who we are as a community. But we don't, it's really, as I said, I mean, we have to have a police force that people have trust in and believes is there for their safety. And we need to continue this discussion, absolutely continue this discussion and tackle each issue as it comes along and find out what's the right balance.
You had touched on in your earlier answer the police review board, and the new police review board that's appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. There have been some calls for moving to maybe something more like an elected board or some other format that's not connected to the mayor or city council. Is that something that you'd like to speak to?
Well, I'd say I have some concerns in the sense that it becomes then more of a politicized issue than it is now. I mean, I've seen over my years on the council, all of the various appointments that the 3 different mayors have made to our boards and committees. And they are generally very, very good. I mean, these are people who have submitted their names. They aren't necessarily someone who's going to run for election, but they are someone whose wisdom and talent and skills are incredibly valuable to us. And so I like the check and balance of the mayor appoints and we approve, which does bring in the element of it's not all of the mayor's power. It's very much the council review his selections or her selections as they've been. So unless there turns out to be serious problems with the method that is in place right now, I would be reluctant to move to an elected board. I think that Evanston is small enough that we can go with an appointed board. But I do think that there are people on that board who right now, who I know, who I don't think they would ever run for election for that. And yet, gosh, that board would not be what it is without them. Yeah.
Okay. So the last 2 questions on policing concern FOIAs. So the first one is, that FOIAs, I mean, especially of the Evanston Police Department, have become something of a contentious issue lately. I know it's something that's come up in City Council. What do you believe the City Council can do to sort of promote transparency and accountability when it comes to police FOIAs?
Well, first of all, the Illinois FOIA law is very, very clear. And as a municipality, we are required to follow it. And it's if people have concerns about how the city is implementing it, then they can bring those to the Attorney General or raise them with the City Council. But FOIA is a really, really critically important tool. I've filed FOIAs in the past. I've answered FOIAs on my time on Capitol Hill. I've answered FOIAs as a member of the Evanston City Council. It's a really, really important tool for people to understand their government better and what government is doing. At the same time, we also have protections in there for privacy purposes. So, and those are critically important for anybody whose name might be in them or whose information is there. And part of the government's process is that we will protect your information unless it is publicly deemed to be a public piece of information. So there's once again, there's a balance there. And I think what we have to do is follow the law and make sure that we're adhering to it and that we are listening to our corporation counsel and our legal department as to how we are answering FOIAs, and to make sure that we are pushing out as much information as we are legally permitted to do while we are still protecting our citizens' privacy. So, that's what FOIA is about, that balance. If you read the law, it's about that balance. And so it opens the doors to a certain extent for people to read documents and understand what the workings of government, but it also maintains the fact that there are certain aspects of documents that need to be kept private because of people's private information that are part of it. So, this is something that as a lawyer, I take very seriously. I'm an officer of the court, so we do need to make sure we are adhering to FOIA very carefully.
And then this last question concerns one specific incident. So recently, Evanston brought in the Northern Illinois Police Alarm System officers to respond to the protests, and these are the ones from Halloween. Do you believe that the level of oversight that the city has over NEPAS is sufficient? And what would you do to make this relationship more transparent to Evanston residents?
Another good question. Well, the Human Services Committee, as you probably know, had this as a special topic at their meeting a week ago Monday, in which they specifically were asking the police chief and the police department to explain that relationship with, the NEPAS relationship, and asked specifically about what the authority, what is like the chain of command, if you want it, and who is those police officers who are coming into our community, whose authority are they under and what rules are they operating under? And it's clear in the NEPAS agreement that, and from what Chief Cook was saying a week ago, that when we call in for mutual aid, when we have maybe a large event and we need to have, for whatever reason, a large event that we need to have backup or support, that those police officers from other communities are all under the command of Evanston police officers. And their authority, their chain of authority and chain of command goes up right through our Evanston Police Department's chain of command. And they have to adhere to our rules and the commands from our police department. I think that we need to make sure that people understand when, in the various scenarios, when we would call on other extra officers from other communities. We all know when there's a bad fire, we see Wilmette trucks or Skokie trucks at the fire, and we're all part of that mutual aid process. And so this is a similar agreement in the sense that when we have the need for extra staffing, extra police for something, then we call on other officers other departments to come in and help. But we have a NEPA's agreement that is on the city website, in which people can read it and see what I too share people's concern that we make sure that other officers, and when anytime they're here, that they are police officers that we can trust, who are listening and under the command of our police department.